My question to you, are you afraid of launching? On this video, I'm going to talk about fear and how fear gets in the way of us doing things that we know we want to do. Specifically, we'll talk about the fear of launching a Kickstarter or crowdfunding project, but this fear concept that I'm going to be talking about today applies to so much in our life. So thank you for joining me here because I think you're going to get a lot of value out of this video because I'm going to share what fear actually means and why it can be one of our most powerful tools to take ourselves to the next level. I'm going to share some from my own experience. I'm also going to share a little bit about how some creators that I've worked with have been able to sort of use that fear and then turn it into something special. And I'm also going to provide a little tip for overcoming fear. All right. And if you're new to me, if you're new to watching this, my name is Tyler James. What I do is I save comic creators, writers, artists, self-publishers from disappointing Kickstarter launches. We help them plan, launch, fund, and fulfill their dream projects, which grow their fan base and expand their creative careers and take things to the next level. All right. And so I'm going to be doing a series of videos here, and I want to do a series of videos that's really tackling that question of why aren't more creators launching projects on Kickstarter specifically. Now, the reality is, if you actually look at the stats, more creators than ever are launching projects on Kickstarter. In fact, last year was a record-setting year for Kickstarter in terms of number of successful projects for comic book creators. All right. And so it's a myth that more creators aren't launching. However, when you compare all of the creators out there, all the creators that I talk to and work with on a regular basis or see out at conventions or interact with in groups online, there are still far more creators who haven't launched than have launched. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And so what I want to do on this series is I want to actually tackle the biggest reasons that are holding creators back. And what I actually did was I put out a call to my audience and I asked for creators to comment. If you haven't launched a project on Kickstarter, I asked them to share why that is that they haven't launched. And so we got a ton of great feedback and a ton of great reasons that creators were presenting. Things like fear of failure, or audience not big enough, or the project isn't finished or ready to go, or Kickstarter's too much work, or I don't have enough time, or I want to get published by a traditional publisher, and that's why I'm not going over there. And so I actually compiled about 15 reasons that one or multiple, in some cases, a half dozen to a dozen creators all sort of said the same thing or liked a reason why. And so I'm going to actually be going step by step, one at a time, and see if we can't either knock all of these down or at least give you some strategies to overcome that obstacle so that you can actually get your project launched and moving, because I believe it's actually super important. And I've actually been on a mission since 2015 to dramatically improve the number of projects that are launched on the Kickstarter platform and are successful. And I had set a goal for the end of this year to make comics the most successful category on the Kickstarter platform. We're still not there yet, but we are getting closer and closer with every single month. And so part of making it the most successful is we just need to get more creators off the fence and launched and rocked and successful. And I actually just sent a little message just a couple hours ago to a creator that I've worked with now, who took him a while to get off the fence and launch, but he just successfully posted in our Comics Launch private Facebook group. And he basically just shared how he finally did it, finally launched, and had a successful launch under his belt. And so it's very, very powerful, and I'm excited for what new is going to be available to him. All right. And so I want to thank you for watching this if you want to dive into it, because we're not going to actually talk about any of those specific items: fear, failure, audience not big enough, project not finished, etc. Because what I really want to do with this topic is tackle the sort of overlying or underlying concept of fear, because in so many of those reasons that people say, this is why I'm not launching, fear is at the heart of it. And so if you're someone who you're a creator, you're a creative person, you've got a project, you've got a dream project in mind, you've got a vision for where you want to go, but you still haven't launched that project. You still haven't launched a crowdfunding project. You still haven't launched a Kickstarter project. Maybe you thought that, well, you know what, it's not for me because, and you have a whole laundry list of reasons. Or maybe you're like so many of the creators that have actually gone and launched projects on Kickstarter, and you felt that fear the whole way through. I think you're going to get a ton of value out of this and give you some new perspectives on how to think about this. So thanks for tuning in, and I appreciate you doing that. And again, before we get into today's topic, I do also want to let you know that I am doing an upcoming free workshop called the Ultimate Comic Book Kickstarter Launch Plan. This is a workshop I've given many times, and I'm excited to give it again. Because if you're thinking about launching a Kickstarter, or whether you're thinking about it, you're actually planning your first launch, maybe you have a project on there right now, or you've launched before and you want bigger results, or even if you're a savvy Kickstarter veteran, but you're always looking to level up, this workshop is going to be valuable for you. I'll be sharing insights from the over now $500,000 in funding that I've raised with my collaborators on projects on Kickstarter. So if you want to get to that, just go over to comicslaunch.com/workshop. You can register over there. And if someone would put that in the comments, that would be greatly appreciated. comicslaunch.com/workshop. All right, so let's get into this. This is the series, the sort of start of the series to get people off the fence and actually into launching. And we're going to start with fear. And let's get real here. Every single creator, every single creator that has launched a project on Kickstarter will tell you that fear was a part of that process. All right. I'm thinking about Melody Pena, a creator that was inside of the Comics Launch course, and worked on her campaign for about 8 months. This is after having been building an audience for many, many, many years. And yet I remember Melody, like the day before her launch or the night before her launch, she posted inside the private Comics Launch Facebook group for comic creators and talking about, how nervous she was, on pins and needles. She was launching. All right. And she ended up doing that, though. She didn't stop. She didn't let that fear stop her. She actually hit that green launch button. And within an hour of her launch, she was fully funded, actually raised over $30,000 in funding in 1 hour after her launch. Now, Melody's experience is not the norm, right? Melody had been building that audience, did an exceptional job on her campaign launch. Definitely not the norm in terms of that tremendous amount of success. But what I want to call out is that she had that tremendous amount of success, but this was her first launch. And even though that's the result that she got, she was still had that same amount of fear that just about everyone has going into that first launch. And the reality is, like, we always, always, always fear things that we have never done before. We almost always fear things that are that we perceive to be putting ourselves out into the world where things are now out of our control. And the reality is, there is a fair amount that is out of your control when you launch that Kickstarter campaign. I can teach you how to make an awesome Kickstarter page. I can show you what kind of marketing to do. I can show you how to talk about your projects to attract people. But what I can't do, and what you can't do, even if you do all those things right, you actually can't make other human beings out there of their own free will go and back your Kickstarter campaigns. There's stuff that is out of your control. And when there's things that are out of our control, it definitely does feel like that can lead to fear. And if you've never actually done it, there's going to be some fear there. And there is a part of our brain, it's like the lizard part of our brain. And what that does is, it's something that's evolved to keep us safe, to keep us protected. The brain, there's a part of our brain that always wants to keep us safe. And so it will want to keep us safe, even if safe is not, even if safe is unfulfilled, even if safe is broke, even if safe is no sales, even if safe is keeping our best creative projects trapped inside of us, even if safe is our voice or our creative vision is silenced or kept to ourselves, because results that we don't currently have outside of our current reality is something new. There is always going to be a part of our brain that's like, don't do that. Maybe you don't do that. And The challenge is that there are a lot of people out there who are getting those messages around fear, like feeling that fear, and they're letting that stop them from launching, or that's letting them stop them from actually going after that. And part of that is that they have a broken mindset around fear. Somewhere along the way, they let themselves decide or think that the fact that they are afraid of something means they should not do it. But what I'm going to try to encourage you, and my goal for today is to share with you, is that I want you to reframe that and use that fear, that acknowledgement of your fear, as an indicator that there is something on the other side of that fear that you need to do or you should be doing, right? And that's really what the successful people out there, they know that the exact opposite is true, that they know that, fear is not telling us what not to do. Fear is actually, they say to themselves, because I'm afraid of this, because I fear this, I must actually take those steps. If you are afraid to launch, that means you must launch. All right. And so, just to give you a story to illustrate this, I can remember back in 2011, 2012, where I was paying attention to what was going on this little brand new platform called Kickstarter. But I was sitting on the sidelines. I was afraid to launch. And there were so many reasons. And I had so many, I was telling myself these were good reasons. And this is a thing. This is the tricky thing about fear, especially for people that are smart, or at least think they're smart, have a little bit of an ego, like myself. Fear often masks itself in logic, right? And so I could point to, I backed 4 other people's Kickstarter projects and they all failed. Or I could point to, the size of my email list at the time, or I could point to the fact that I would post stuff on social media and get, hardly any likes or engagement. Or I could point to, the fact that there are other people out there doing better work than I could do, or I was doing at the time. I could make a laundry list of all these reasons not to launch. All right. But, and back then I could also say, well, it's just going to be, it's going to be too much to work. And back in 2010, 2011, 2012, when I was, wanting to launch, but sitting there on the sidelines, afraid, there weren't the resources that there are now. There weren't the success rates of projects that there are now. There weren't the people, like the networks and the ecosystem built around Kickstarter and these crowdfunding platforms and all these best practices out there that there are now. All right. And so the reality is, I let that keep me on the sidelines for far too long. But eventually, I put together, I put my head down, I committed to launching. I rallied my tribe around a project that was about something that was a little bit bigger than just me and my vision. I sort of invited everyone that I was connected with in the comics space at the time on an anthology project. And that, the fact that it wasn't just me, I think for me personally, was a big part of getting over that fear and actually launching. And the results of that very first launch spoke for itself. We raised $26,000 on my first launch back in 2012, and that totally changed the game and got the ball rolling for Comics Tribe. And we've really never looked back since then. But what if I had actually listened to that fear? And I think about that, and I try to think about that from time to time. Because there's like a theory, those of you sci-fi buffs, sci-fi heads out there, you probably know this theory more than me, but there's sort of like this theory in quantum physics that is based on sort of like the laws that many people have come up with, where they say, time is infinite, right? But energy can neither be created nor destroyed, right? And that everything that exists is energy, like we're energy, or energy, et cetera. And so if time is infinite and energy can neither be created and destroyed, that basically means that this moment right now, has already happened and will happen again and again and again infinitely. Like all these pieces, because eventually this stuff is all going to repeat, like if time is infinite. But what that also means is that every possible permutation of like our lives have actually already come to pass. And maybe these are alternative dimensions, alternative realities, or whatever. I know we're talking a little bit far out stuff here, but I like to think that there is a world out there that I listened to that fear, and I chose that fear, and I let that fear keep me from launching, keep me from getting outside of my comfort zone, keep me from actually taking the steps necessary to launch that first project. And then I think about what would the effect, what would that world look like? What would that world look like if I didn't launch and I actually stayed on the sidelines? Because honestly, if I didn't launch that first project, I probably wouldn't have launched my second, my third, my fourth, and certainly not the 18th project with my collaborators. But if it wasn't for that first project, and if I never launched that first project, there'd be dozens of collaborators that I would have never worked with, and many of them that I've gone on to work with multiple times. There would be an international fan base, and a fan base that was attracted to the launch that I never would have reached. There would be now, $500,000 in just Kickstarter funding, but a whole lot more of that in terms of the conventions that I probably wouldn't have gone to because I didn't have the product to sell, or the sales in other channels like Amazon or our online stores or other things, or the direct market. We never would have had the funding to get into Diamond in the direct market. And so there's this massive ripple effect that happened from that first successful launch. But imagine I let the fear stop me from doing that. And now I want you, if you're watching this, I want you to look at your own life and consider the things that you've done that you're most proud of. The things that light you up, the things that when even on your worst days, you can hold on to these things because you're proud of them. Like, I don't know, maybe it's your kids. Maybe it's your education, the fact that maybe you were the first in your family to go to college, or maybe to grad school, or even high school education. Maybe it's your job, or maybe a promotion that you got, or maybe it's maybe it's something related to your own work and pushing yourself. But in all of those things that you're most proud of, I guarantee you, there were moments, and usually multiple moments, in order to make those achievements where there was fear at play, but you did not let that fear stop you. I've got a stepdaughter who's going into college. Well, she had to take the SATs in order to get into college. All right. And that's, I remember that being extremely nerve-wracking, and all the tests and all those things to do that. Right. If you have children, if you have a significant other, like, there was fear in terms of even just approaching that other person, or working that out, or, even the fear around just being, a good parent to people, like, but without that fear, you wouldn't. And like, the fact that fear existed, but you still persisted, is the reason why you have this stuff in your life right now. But let yourself imagine that world where, instead of actually going for it, you let the fear say, you know what, let's not take that test. You know what, let's not send that application in. You know what, let's not go for that promotion. You know what, let's not make that email invitation. Let's not solicit that, or let's not submit to that publisher. Let's not say, hey, what's up, to that artist whose stuff that you love, and who you ended up going out and worked with. There's quantum physics says there's a world out there where you let your fear stop you from doing all those things. And I also want you to look at the heroes in your life, and you can talk about real or fictional. All right. Any of the people that you look up to, it's often because they have faced fear. They have faced adversity. They had faced challenges that we have no idea how we would respond to, and they had faced moments of fear, but they did not let that fear stop them from going after what they truly want, right? Like, we wouldn't look up to people who they were afraid, and so they just didn't do it, and they didn't change, or they didn't take any action, right? No, we follow the action takers. We look up to the action takers. We want to respect those action takers, all right? And so what I wanted you to do with that context in mind, in terms of, you know, the fact that you, like, the best stuff in your life is already stuff that you've achieved by facing your fears and going for it. And everyone you look up to, whether they're, you know, fictional characters, your Harry Potters, your Jon Snows, etc., or people in real life, your you know, whoever it is that you look up to as your role models. I want you to now imagine that it's 5 years from now, and you get to just check in with two different versions of yourself, or two different realities for yourself. One reality is where you are still afraid of every single thing you're afraid to do right now. Every challenge, every obstacle, every reason, every excuse, you still have all of those things in your life, and you are still taking the same exact actions, and still, for whatever reason, not going for the thing that you're going after, and you have the same exact results as you have right now, or maybe a little worse, because if we're not growing, we're usually receding, right? So that's one version you get to look in on. And then another version is the one where you did the thing that you were afraid of, and as a result, you learned some new things, you pushed yourself, you faced newer, bigger challenges and obstacles and roadblocks, and took some some twisty paths, and got some skin knees, and got some bruises, but they're different than the things that you're facing with now. And you can also, as a result, point back to some of the key moments that got you from where you are right now to where you are in the future, and some key things that you did back when you were afraid to do those things along the way. All right. And so these are sort of two realities that you can play with a little bit. These are two things that you can really dive into and think about. And then you can just decide, which version of the next 5 years do you actually want, right? And what's the real thing that to be afraid of? Because for me, when I think back 6 years ago, when I was still on the sidelines, not launching, it's far, far scarier to me to think about the prospects of actually giving into that fear and not doing anything, and not setting off the ripple effects to get me to the point where I am today, where I am no longer afraid to launch projects and go after dream projects at all. And I've also have been able to help hundreds of creators launch and succeed with their projects. Like, the ripple effect of that, that's what I'm comparing. I'm scared of that reality of not doing that, as opposed to the smaller things that might happen if I really was going for something else. All right. And so I really want you to think that. That's my invitation to you, is that from now on, use fear as a compass. All right. Use fear as a compass, pointing you towards the things that you must do in order to get the things that you truly want. All right. Because we're not afraid of stuff that we know how to do. We're not afraid of things that we already have. We're not afraid of things that we're already doing. We just don't. Like, those are life. And so the fact that we want something, but we're a little bit afraid of going for it, that doesn't mean walk away from it. That should be a signal and a compass and a North Star that that's the exact direction that you need to go in. All right. And so what I want you to do is just get into the habit of looking at your specific fears, name them, and any specific fears, challenges, beliefs, things that are holding you back. Know that most of those are actually just rooted in fear. Marcus Aurelius, you know him from Gladiator. but famous Roman emperor. He said the impediment to action, or said the impediment to action advances action, and what stands in the way becomes the way. Ryan Holiday paraphrased that as the obstacle is the way. All right, and so the fears that you have are an indicator of the direction in which you need to go. All right. And so I want you, sort of as a comics launcher here, is sometime just write down a list of all of the things that you are afraid of. Just all of them, all the fears. And then from that list, pick one to go in that direction, not away from it. All right. I hope this at least gives you a sense of why acknowledging fears, especially fears related to launching or going after something bigger for yourself, can actually be a good thing and an indicator of where you're headed. I want to encourage you to remember and to remember the fact that, like, fear, it should not be taken as a reason not to do something. It should actually be taken as an indicator of the direction that you should head. And I invite you to adopt that as a practice going forward. Again, if you're just as a reminder, if you're interested in going deeper with me on what it truly takes to have success on Kickstarter and have a successful comics launch, I would want to invite you to attend my upcoming workshop, The Ultimate Comic Book Kickstarter Launch Plan. You can register for free over at comicslaunch.com/workshop. We'll cover 7 keys to unlocking your best Kickstarter launch ever. But I also want to invite you to tune in, because I'm going to be tackling each and every one of those things that people are afraid of when it comes to launching projects on Kickstarter. I'm going to tackle each and every one of those challenges or reasons why creators like you maybe aren't launching or aren't launching enough or are still sitting on the sidelines, because my goal is to get as many creators as possible off the sidelines and onto the Kickstarter platform and beyond, so they can energize, expand their fan base, so they can fund their dream projects, and so they can level up, because the world really does need more creators passionately bringing their art, their projects, their energy, and their enthusiasm into the world. And I'm excited to see more of you do that. And so in order to get there, we're going to overcome a whole bunch of obstacles. And so I hope you'll subscribe to the Comics Launch message wherever it is that you watch this stream, and keep coming back and watching as we are going to tackle all of these obstacles together, hopefully. Thanks so much for watching, and I can't wait to see what you launch next. Take care.